Imagine moving into your dream home only to realize someone has been watching you, tracking your every move. Imagine hearing a stranger's desperate sobs on the phone, begging for forgiveness after brutally killing someone. And then, imagine finding out someone's been living in the walls of your house, watching you from the darkness. These aren't just stories. They happened, and they could happen to anyone. Stay close, because by the time you hear the whole story, you might never feel safe again. When we moved into 657 Boulevard, we thought it was the beginning of our perfect life. The house was a stunning colonial-style home in a quiet suburban town with the kind of charm you only see in movies. We had everything we ever wanted. A big yard for the kids to play in, spacious rooms, and neighbors who waved as we drove by. It was the American dream, but dreams can quickly turn into nightmares. The first letter came 3 days after we moved in. It was a plain white envelope with no return address, addressed to the new owners. I didn't think much of it. Probably a welcome letter from a neighbor or something. But as soon as I opened it, my stomach dropped. "Dearest new owners," the letter began. "Allow me to introduce myself. I am the Watcher, and I have been watching 657 Boulevard for years, as my father did before me, and his father before him. Now it is my turn to watch you. Welcome to your new home." I laughed at first, thinking it was some kind of prank, but as I read on, the tone shifted from strange to sinister. The Watcher described intimate details about us, our children's names, where they played, and how long we'd been in the house. He ended the letter with a chilling question. "Have you found what lies within the walls of 657 Boulevard?" I didn't know it then, but this was just the beginning. A week went by before the second letter arrived. By this point, I had nearly forgotten about the first one, convincing myself it was just a weird joke. But when I opened the envelope, the same eerie feeling washed over me. The letter wasn't just creepy, it was personal. "I see you have started renovations. Is that for the family's sake, or the house's?" How could they know? We hadn't told anyone about the renovations, not even our neighbors. But the Watcher knew. Every detail of our lives seemed to be under scrutiny, like there were eyes everywhere, always watching. "The children are so young. Have you thought about what the house wants for them? The house has a history, and it craves young blood." The police were no help. They said the letters were probably a prank, maybe from a disgruntled former owner or a bored neighbor, but it didn't feel like a joke. Whoever was sending these letters knew too much about us, about the house. It was like they were inside, observing us from the shadows. Every time the kids played in the backyard, I felt a pair of unseen eyes, watching, waiting. The third letter changed everything. It wasn't just a veiled threat, it was a declaration. 657 Boulevard has been the subject of my family for decades. It is now my time to watch, as it was my father's and grandfather's. Have you found the secrets yet, or will I have to show them to you? The tone of the letter was more aggressive, more demanding. Whoever the Watcher was, they weren't satisfied with just observing anymore. They wanted us to know that they were in control. And worse, they seemed to be getting closer. I started checking the windows every night, locking the doors twice before going to bed. My husband said I was overreacting, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, even when we were alone. It was as if the house itself was alive, breathing, waiting for something to happen. One night, while I was sitting in the living room, I swore I saw a shadow move outside the window. But when I ran to check, there was nothing there, just the darkness pressing in against the glass. The fourth letter arrived in the dead of night. This time, it wasn't just a warning. It was a demand. Have you found what's hidden in the walls yet? The house won't rest until you do. Your family is just the beginning. I couldn't sleep that night. The words haunted me. What did the watcher mean by what's hidden in the walls? I started to doubt everything. Every creak, every groan the house made in the middle of the night. Were we alone, or was there something else living in the walls? The next morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I started searching the house, pulling back carpets, tapping on walls, looking for anything out of the ordinary. But there was nothing. No hidden rooms, no secret passages. Just an old house, creaking under the weight of time. But the watcher wasn't done with us yet. The fifth letter was the breaking point. It was short, simple, and terrifying. This will be my last letter. I have been patient, but now the house needs blood. I can hear it in the walls. If you do not leave, I will have no choice but to show you the true nature of 657 Boulevard. Time is running out. The message was clear. We were no longer welcome in our own home. The watcher was done waiting, and I could feel the tension in the house building, like a storm ready to break. I begged my husband to leave, but he refused. He said the letters were nothing more than empty threats, that there was no real danger. But I knew better. Something was coming, and I didn't want to stick around to find out what it was. In the end, it wasn't a decision. It was a necessity. The fear had taken hold of me, and I couldn't live like that anymore. The watcher had won. We packed our things and left in the middle of the night. As we drove away, I looked back at the house one last time, watching as it disappeared into the darkness. I couldn't help but wonder if the watcher was out there, standing in the shadows, watching us leave. We never found out who the watcher was or what they wanted. The police investigated, but the trail went cold. No fingerprints, no suspects, just the lingering fear that, somewhere out there, the watcher is still waiting. It was the middle of the night when the call came in, thin, trembling, and choked with sobs. The voice on the other end of the line wasn't angry or aggressive. It was pleading, desperate, as if the man was drowning in his own guilt. "Oh my God, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to kill her. Please, you have to find her. I need help. I'm so sorry." The dispatcher tried to ask questions, but the man just kept repeating himself, his weepy voice rising and falling in hysterical apology. Then, as quickly as he had called, he hung up, leaving only the sound of dead air behind. Minutes later, the body of Karen Potak was found, brutally beaten and left for dead on a frozen street in Minneapolis. The police had no clues, no witnesses, only the sound of a man's weeping voice echoing on the 911 tape. It wasn't long before the second call came. The voice was the same, sobbing, panicked, filled with regret. "I did it again. I can't stop. You have to stop me, please." This time, the body of Kimberly Compton was discovered, a 20-year-old woman stabbed to death after getting off a bus. Again, the caller provided just enough information to lead the police to the body, but never enough to catch him. The press dubbed him the weepy-voiced killer, and the entire city of Minneapolis was gripped by fear. Who was this man who murdered with such brutality, yet cried like a lost child afterward? Why did he keep calling, confessing to his crimes, but always disappearing before the police could find him? As the months passed, the calls kept coming. Each time, the killer's voice was the same, pleading for forgiveness, begging for someone to stop him, even as he described his next victim's body with chilling accuracy. "I can't help myself. Please, God, forgive me. I'm so sorry." His victims were random, young women with no connection to each other, except for the brutality of their deaths. The police were growing desperate, but the killer always seemed to slip through their fingers, leaving behind nothing but the sound of his haunting, weeping voice. For the people of Minneapolis, every night felt like a countdown. Who would be next? Where would the killer strike again? Everything changed when one of his victims survived. Denise Williams had been attacked, stabbed multiple times, but managed to fight back, kicking the killer and escaping to a nearby road where she was found by a passing driver. Her description of the attacker was vague, but it gave the police their first real lead. He was a small, unassuming man, someone who looked ordinary, maybe even harmless, but there was something wild in his eyes, something that told her he wouldn't stop until someone made him. For the first time, the police felt they were closing in on the killer. But even as they hunted him, the calls kept coming. In 1982, the police finally caught a break. A man named Paul Michael Stefani was arrested after attempting to kill another woman. And when they played the tapes of the weepy-voiced calls, the match was undeniable. Stephanie's voice was the same, high-pitched, pleading, filled with guilt and fear. In the interrogation room, Stephanie broke down. He confessed to the murders, his voice trembling just as it had on the 911 calls. He spoke of the overwhelming rage that took over when he killed, the voices in his head that wouldn't stop until he acted. And every time he said, the regret was immediate, crushing him like a wave of sorrow the moment the violence was done. Paul Michael Stephanie was convicted of multiple murders, but the mystery of the weepy-voiced killer never truly ended. Even after his arrest, there were those who wondered if he was truly the only one responsible, if the calls were part of something deeper, something more disturbed than just a single man's madness. Stephanie died in prison in 1998, but his voice, those desperate, weeping pleas for forgiveness, still haunt the recordings. The tears were real, but so were the brutal murders, and the city of Minneapolis will never forget the killer who wept for his own sins, even as he committed them. T started with the scratching, tiny, almost imperceptible, like the sound of mice scurrying through the walls. At first, we barely noticed it. Our new house was old, after all, and old houses make noise. But then the sounds grew louder, more deliberate. I would be lying in bed at night, just about to drift off to sleep, when I'd hear it, a faint tapping, like fingers drumming against wood. I'd sit up, heart pounding, but the sound would stop as soon as I listened closely. We told ourselves it was nothing, just the house settling, just our imaginations. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. One night, the noises changed. Instead of scratching, we heard footsteps, soft, shuffling, like someone walking slowly across the attic floor. My husband grabbed a flashlight, determined to prove it was just a raccoon or some other animal that had gotten inside. But when we climbed into the attic, it was empty. No sign of animals, no broken windows or loose boards where something could have gotten in. Just the silence of an old house creaking under its own weight. But I could feel it. Someone had been there. I knew it. The next time I heard the noise, I decided to investigate on my own. The sound was coming from the air vent, a faint whisper, like someone talking just out of earshot. I leaned in closer, straining to hear, and that's when I heard it. "I can see you." My heart stopped. I pulled back, staring at the vent, but there was no one there. No sign of anyone at all. But the voice, it was real. I know it was. I told my husband, but he didn't believe me. He said I was just hearing things, that the stress of the move was getting to me. But I knew what I heard, and I wasn't the only one. A few weeks later, we started to notice things going missing. Small items at first. A set of keys, a pair of socks. Then, larger things. An entire carton of milk from the fridge, a blanket from the living room. It didn't make any sense. No one could have gotten inside. We were locking the doors, keeping the windows shut tight. But things kept disappearing, and the noises in the walls were getting worse. One day, I was cleaning out a closet when I found something that made my blood run cold. There, behind the old coats and boxes, was a tiny door I had never noticed before. It was barely big enough for a child to crawl through, leading into the dark space between the walls. I called my husband, and we opened the door together. What we found inside made my skin crawl. Inside the tiny crawl space were blankets, empty food containers, and even a small radio. Someone had been living in our walls. Someone who had been watching us, listening to us, and stealing from us without us ever knowing. I wanted to call the police, but my husband insisted on checking the rest of the house first. We searched every room, every hidden space, but there was no sign of the intruder. Whoever had been living in the walls was gone, but the fear never left. Every time I heard a creak or a whisper, I wondered if they had come back, if they were still watching us from the shadows. The last time I saw him, it was in the middle of the night. I woke up to the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving through the hallway outside our bedroom. I got up, heart pounding, and opened the door just in time to see a figure disappearing around the corner. I chased after him, but by the time I reached the stairs, he was gone. The door to the attic was open, but there was no one inside. I knew then that he had been there all along, hiding in the walls, watching us, waiting for the right moment to strike. We moved out of the house soon after. I couldn't stay there any longer, not knowing if the stranger in the walls would ever come back. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear the sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, like someone walking just beyond the edge of my vision. It all started when I found the first photograph, a grainy, black and white image of me standing outside my house, taken from a distance. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe it was an old photo someone had left behind, a forgotten snapshot from the past. But then I looked closer. The clothes I was wearing in the photo were the same ones I had worn just the day before. And the house in the background, it was my house, exactly as it looked now. Someone had taken a picture of me without my knowledge. Someone had been watching. Over the next few weeks, more photographs started to appear. They were left in my mailbox, slipped under my door, even tucked into the windshield wiper of my car. Each one was a candid shot of me, walking to my car, sitting at a cafe, even through the window of my bedroom. Whoever was taking these photos knew my routine. They knew where I would be, and they were getting closer. One day, I found a photo of myself sleeping. The angle was strange, like it had been taken from above, as if someone had been standing over my bed. The photos weren't just of me anymore. In some of the pictures, there was something else. A shadowy figure in the background, barely visible, but unmistakably there. Whoever was taking the photos wasn't alone. They were being watched too. I started to feel paranoid, always looking over my shoulder, wondering who was out there with a camera, waiting for the perfect shot. But no matter how hard I looked, I never saw anyone. The photos kept coming, and the shadow in the background grew clearer with each one. I decided to confront whoever was sending the photos. I set up a camera of my own, hoping to catch the person in the act. For days, I watched the footage, but there was nothing. No one delivering the photos, no one lurking outside my house. Then, one night, I heard a noise, a soft click, like the shutter of a camera. I ran to the window, but there was no one there. The next morning, I found a new photograph waiting for me. This time, it was a picture of me looking out the window, searching for the photographer. The message was clear. They were always one step ahead. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I waited by the window for hours, hoping to catch the person in the act. Just as I was about to give up, I saw him, a figure standing across the street, holding a camera, staring right at me. I grabbed my phone and called the police, but by the time they arrived, the photographer was gone. All they found was a single photograph left on my doorstep. It was a picture of me, holding the phone, with the police lights flashing in the background. The photographer was taunting me, showing me that they could always get closer than I thought. The last photo I received was the most disturbing of all. It was a picture of an empty street. No people, no cars, just a long, deserted road stretching into the distance. At first, I didn't understand what it meant, but then it hit me. The street in the photo was the one I lived on, and the angle of the shot was from right outside my front door. Whoever had taken the photo had been standing there, just a few feet away from where I slept, watching and waiting. I never received another photo after that. The phantom photographer disappeared as suddenly as they had come, leaving only a trail of eerie, unsettling images behind. These stories remind us of one chilling truth. Sometimes the real monsters aren't from our nightmares. They're the strangers lurking in plain sight. If you want more terrifying true encounters like these, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss what's coming next. There's always more to uncover, and some stories are just beginning.